good evening and welcome to this edition of The Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu Shampagi. We start tonight's discussion on a sad note. Major landslides in Bundibujo have claimed some lives. The count is still ongoing. We will be in subsequent bulletins, NTV will keep bringing updates on the disaster in Bundibujo, mudslides that have wiped out almost an entire village, entire township in Bundibujo. The walk that became the talk, the anti-corruption walk led by President Yoweri Museveni, finally happened, caused major transport movement chaos around the city, but also made it easier for some people to move because the city had been cleared for the walkers who marched from the Constitution Square to Kololo ceremonial grounds, or what some people call Kololo airstrip. And the debate that has followed, people have been asking, one of the major comments that came out of that walk, the speeches that were made, is the speech of the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Jacob Olanya, who said, let's look around ourselves. All of us seated here and standing here are corrupt. We're going to possibly go back to our same ways. That call to redemption. But did it actually achieve what it was supposed to achieve? We'll discuss that. And also we will be discussing the continuing crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Fresh fighting has been reported in some areas of the Democratic Republic of Congo, but also demonstrations against the biggest, the most expensive, and the most ineffective peacekeeping mission of the United Nations, which has also become the longest. I think it's the longest so far that we have. The most expensive, the highest numbers, and the most ineffective peacekeeping missions of the United Nations in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We'll be able to discuss that as well. Let me introduce my panel. I have two fresh faces on the panel. I think Moses has been here once. Let me introduce Rizdel Kasasra. He's a senior writer and editor at the Daily Monitor. Rizdel, very nice to have you.
Thank you.
Rizdel is specializes actually in largely he reports security-related things, run beautiful series on Somalia, the conflict in Somalia, which we have covered extensively, and security within the country. But we'll be discussing corruption with you and the disaster in Bundibujo and elsewhere. I didn't mention the flooding in that cut of West Nile, which we also discuss. I have Dicta Simwe. Dicta needs not much introduction. She's a senior writer at the East African. Very nice to have you, Dicta. And Moses Cheyune. Moses Cheyune is a writer, is a parliamentary reporter for the Daily Monitor. Very nice to have you.
Sure. Thank you, Charles. Good evening, viewers.
Let's start with that walk that became the talk. That's my own phrasing. We did have a discussion about this on the Friday panel on KFM, and I received two phone calls. One that Friday evening, another yesterday afternoon. And I'll mention the people because I believe they'll not take offense in me mentioning the discussion we had with them. The first person to call, we had a very, very long chat, was my friend Moses Biarhanga. Moses Biarhanga has served the president since he left university. He's a senior presidential advisor now, but he's one of those advisors who actually advised the president because he was a presidential assistant on political affairs for very many years before he was promoted to presidential advisor. His concern was that our discussion on KFM had focused a lot on the president's brown envelopes that he goes dishing out to everybody, and a bit on the vehicles that he gives to religious leaders. Whenever someone is made a bishop, he gives them a vehicle. Then I received another call yesterday from the chief political commissar of the Uganda People's Defense Forces, Bahoko Barije, yesterday.
He's a deputy.
A deputy, yes. We had a long chat, and for him, and Barije was saying, Mr. Bahoko Barije was saying that we need to deal with corruption the same way we dealt with HIV/AIDS. And he says, one, acknowledgement that we have a problem, two, committing to talk about it, and three, he called for, I'm putting these words in his mouth, but he was referring to something like reverse stigmatization, because HIV/AIDS, we were talking about World AIDS Day last Sunday. The fight against corruption should stigmatize the corrupt and to get the communities to appreciate that they don't benefit from this corruption. It's the individuals that benefit from it. Now, Dixon, I want to start with you. I know you're tired of the anti-corruption walk. This was for optics. Did it achieve what it was supposed to achieve?
What was it supposed to achieve? If it was for optics, we saw them, everyone was talking about them, so I guess it achieved what it was supposed to achieve.
It did.
If the issue was optics, yeah, then because that's all we can say, and actually Nakalema did say it was for public relations. So yeah, it achieved what it was intended to achieve.
No, but you know public relations is supposed to be positive. Public relations, not negative public relations. So they didn't get the positive, the positive vibes it was supposed to achieve.
I am sure you've heard the phrase that being talked about, whether negative or positive, is a good thing when you need to be noticed. So
in relation to corruption in this country?
Everything.
Or the fighters.
That's why people release nude photos. That's why, because publicity is publicity. It doesn't matter whether it's negative or positive. So
really, let me come to you. When you're making the decisions to deploy, getting people to struggle, I was listening in on morning talk shows on that day, and people were talking about walking from I don't know where up to their workstations, the chaos. Someone tweeted and said, if you're coming towards Bugolobi, better carry your own rod because of the amount of chaos. One of the things I was chatting with Moses about was I was critical for the for purposes of the optics of, for example, that the president was walking, but he had almost his entire convoy following him. And Moses said, you know, for the president's security, and they said the distance between Constitution Square, where the walk started from, and Kololo, Independence Grounds, where it was supposed to end, if anything was happening, if you'd have had a minimum of that other security, because he had security all around him, he had all the people that he needed around him, but to have the convoy driving along from Constitution Square to Kololo, and you're talking about fighting corruption and wastage of public resources, I felt that was a little bit oddish. But the good thing that, for me, that brought was it's unleashed Nakalema. He was in this studio twice at least. He was on Kamara's show on the spot on Thursday. He had been here to give interviews. She had been here. Sorry, she had been here to give interviews earlier, and I felt that was a little bit good to give some fresh face, visibility to fight corruption. What was the thinking? Did it achieve what it was supposed to achieve?
I think, like Dictor said, it was to dramatize the fight against corruption, and I think indeed it achieved that. But for the last, I think, 3 months, I remember, you know, Seven talking about you wait for December 4th. So I thought probably he would come up with a radical, you know, proposals to fight corruption. But we didn't see that. But however, we're talking about corruption now, and I think when it came to, dramatizing, yeah, indeed it achieved what it achieved. But in terms of, you know, getting radical proposals to fight corruption, I think there's nothing much really we saw.
Why am I not seeing those editorials? Say, wait a minute, I've seen things circulating on social media. I don't know how true it is, of the cost of the work.
You see, the cost of the work at the moment is hard to tell, because the figures are only known and kept by the owners of the whatever program it was against corruption. But to me, the cost went beyond the financial cost of
printing T-shirts,
of the president's security detail, and all that. Many people lost businesses. You know, many people had contracts, many people had commitments to deliver that day, and the organizers of this anti-corruption work did not pay attention to that. We had people queuing up in that traffic jam, going to hospitals, and they never reached there. Whatever happened next is something to follow up, and we have a task as the media to go and make sure that at least to follow that up. But I know of one general in his car with 2 stars. That's a major general. A 2-star general who was supposed to be going to Nakasero Hospital to be attended to is not well. You know, he's really ill. But he was unable to go to visit or to have that checkup. If a general in his car, official car, with all the with the, what are those stones called? The ranks marked, could not make through the jail.
Security expert is
You have another general at the helm of this work, working with his military convoy, not minding about what the economic bearing it has on the country. And at the end of the day, we have declarations signed and nobody sees the declaration.
No, but if you're trying
do you
to
then say
bring
we-
attention to what Barija told me, is it's even beyond a malignant cancer. It's a pandemic. You need to bring attention. You need to bring the world to discuss it. You do whatever you can to get the world to discuss it.
But
I would
I
imagine.
mean, you've had so many discussions. You've seen the president changing from one individual to another and leaving some of them in acting capacity. For instance, today you have Justice Irene Mulyagonja, who has been the substantive IGJ, appointed to the Supreme Court or court or High Court, or whatever the appointment is. But you have a vacuum here.
But you know,
And then you will have to come and say, these institutions or these individuals are not working. When you had the president talk about the institutions that should recruit from integrity or basing on integrity, he made mention of individuals. Nakalema, Mulyagonja is talking about people and not institutions. If we had a system we respected, Charles, and we said the office of the IGJ is free to investigate and report, whether it is the president, whether it is a minister, whether it is a simple or common journalist, say Moses Cheune, involved in corruption, name, shame, take action. Let the world see Cheune Moses being paraded and told of that, Moses, you ate money you're not supposed to have eaten. This money was supposed to help ABCD. Account for it. If you cannot account, go to jail. What do we see instead? When we have people arrested, you get people having presidential pardons.
Yeah, only one, Mulindo Averimumaso, has received a presidential pardon for corruption.
But
And he stole little money. He stole little money from, I think, some mobilization he was supposed to do in the Bundubujo, but that's many years ago.
But Charles,
I haven't seen
you know,
another presidential pardon.
we have officers.
Yes.
We have officers in government serving up to now who were forced to return some money, money that had been stolen, but again they keep in employment. Very lastly, I think it was last year when we had the Kutesa scandal. We asked the president, what is he thinking about it, and what is he going to do about it? And he said, Mr. Kutesa got some money, about 500. It's $50 million.
Half a million.
$50,000.
50,000.
500,000.
No, it's
$500,000.
500,000. Yes.
Half a million.
Yes, that's 500,000.
Half a million dollars.
Yes. And he donated it to charity. Now,
No, he
And he
received
promised-
the money for charitable work he was doing in the constituency.
and he promised to investigate. He said that he had tasked the Attorney General to investigate. When the Attorney General came to Parliament, he was supposed to have given a report of what happened. To date, even yesterday, I tried to reach out to the Attorney General, Mr. Byaruhanga, about the same case. How far has he gone with the investigations? The moment you ask him about Kutesa, he keeps quiet. Is this government then ready to fight corruption?
Moses, you forget one fundamental thing that is a bit touchy to discuss that, or to discuss, but we must say it because there's an official record in a court in New York that doesn't just mention Sam Kutesa, it also mentions the president of the Republic
Yes.
of Uganda and says the whole deal was $1 million, so $500,000 to the president of the Republic of Uganda, $500,000 for those charitable projects in Sembabule. But Dictor, the president made mention of something that people have been debating and going over and over. Two things, fundamental ones. One, he said he knows of corrupt people. He's aware of corrupt people, but he doesn't have the evidence to prosecute them. I have seen people doing interpretation of English to say, if you know, it means, the word know means that you have information, just speaking without actual information. What did you make of that?
In the same speech, he also said he has people who investigate things that he hears about. But somehow, the only time his investigative teams get to get something, it's because someone is at the lowest level possible. It's not people who are close to him. It's not people for whom he calls NRM caucuses so that they can trash a parliament committee report that is talking about a corrupt minister or whatever. It's not people who have been censured and then gotten back their jobs as ministers. So really, it just says that the president knows, but he does not want to do anything with that information. For me, that's the simple answer, because he told that in that same speech, he said he has had his teams investigate and bring to book certain individuals where they were involved in things they ought not have been involved in. But in the same speech, he says, I know, but I can't do it. I can't do anything because I have no evidence. What's that? So either he has the ability to have these things investigated or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, then he should have said so. But if he does, like he said he does, then the thing that most makes sense is that he doesn't want to investigate these people so that he can get the information.
The work becomes a show.
The contradiction about that work, Resdale, was that, and we discussed it last Sunday on this show, was that the president has the means, has the authority. He appoints all these people to do something about corruption. But then he was using what we discussed on the show and said is the weapon of the weak to lead a walk. Because it's only the weak who say, what can I do? They hold a demonstration, they walk.
They protest, they self-immolate like the gentleman in Tunisia, things like that.
Yeah, people who walked Martin Luther King against racism in America, people like Mahatma Gandhi against colonial occupation in India, the walk to work in 2011. It's a weapon for the weak. But if the president is the one who's leading this walk, and then he goes to Kololo and tells the nation, I know the corrupt, but I have no evidence. And yet every investigative agency in this country, those that existed before him and those that he has created, their purpose of the investigation ends up on his desk. Every institution he has appointed reports actually to the president. What was he what was he saying to the country about his commitment to fight corruption?
I think this work reminds me of the story of Zambia. I think the current Zambian president, Edgar Lungu, when they held prayers to pray for their currency that was losing value, and they held the prayers to save Kwacha. But I think to fight corruption in Uganda or all over the world, I think we have to make it risky. The best way to fight corruption, I think, is to make it risky. If, like I had earlier said, if the president had probably, talked about, these radical proposals, that it would.
Tom Malaba last Sunday had a very radical proposal, which was trending on Twitter.
For him, it was all about killing people. But I think if I don't know whether that law is there, but if you made it risky for those who are involved, say, taking away the properties they have, they have, and I think it would make this corruption risky. And if those want to be involved, probably I think they would think twice. But again, too, if you look at these, these senior government officials who do accountability and hold set funds, most of them, they are in middle age, 40 to 50. Imagine if you're 40 years and you are given 30 years, for stealing government funds. I think you would definitely know it would be risky. That money you've stolen wouldn't help.
People have been referencing Kashaka, the PS. I think was in local government. People have been referencing Luamafa, the former PS of public. Was it a public service?
Public
yeah,
service.
he was a public service, and they're saying these are people who are paying for their crimes. People have referenced David Chandi Jamwa. People have referenced Kazinda and said these are people paying for their crimes, for being corrupt. And what you're talking about, jail them for a long period of time. It does that.
But I mean, if I steal 4 or 5 billion shillings and I'm given 10 years, 10 years, and then after 10 years I come back and I start enjoying my loot. So and then it doesn't make sense, you know. In those 10 years, you spend 2 or 3 on bail, you're out doing your own thing. And in the end, I mean, they get back to societies and enjoy the
He has suggested that, the president, to his credit, he has said that he needs a stronger law to deny bail to the corrupt, to deny bail to some of these undeserving people he believes are undeserving. But the system has changed now. You can even be convicted, but then apply for bail and be bailed out on appeal, because the presumption of your innocence goes up to the highest court possible, which is the Supreme Court, that you have to exhaust.
That makes sense in my view. The president, what the president is trying to do, and I think the courts have been doing that. Sometimes they convict you based on the public relations around you. That's dangerous. The effect of that, of saying we shall, if there is a whiff of corruption around you, or if they say you're corrupt and the people around you, the general public agrees, we shall deny you bail. What will happen is then we don't actually use our institutions to make sure we are taking the right people to court. And when we so what we have, and that's the problem of the system we have now, it's like a rotary. It's like it's a gamble. You steal, sometimes you're arrested and sent to jail. Sometimes
you steal and get away with it.
You get away with it, and the majority get away with it. So that's we should have institutions that you can test to the highest possible level, and allowing people to be innocent until we can confirm properly that they are guilty is one way of testing our systems to make sure that they are functioning the way they should. So the president should not argue, because I mean, unless that person dies, if they get bail and they stay out and they do their whatever, they go on with their lives until we can convict them completely that they are corrupt. I do not see the problem with that.
Otherwise, you'll pick up all your political opponents and accuse them of corruption. Everybody you think is using their office has a different ideology from yours. You'll throw them in jail and let them rot there. And then the president talked about something else. We are focusing on the president because one is the fountain of honor. He led this march, and the questions about corruption actually should be answered in his office. He's created all these formal and ad hoc institutions around the state, around the presidency, to fight corruption. He talked about something interesting. He said, "I am rich, but I am not corrupt." And people interpreted that to be somebody circulated something and said he was boxed into a corner by Olanya's comments, and he had to become defensive immediately. But then the test also is you either have won the lottery, or you have inherited your wealth, or you run a business, or you have invented something that you have sold for a very high price, because wealth should be matched against income. Yeah. And income is tested through 1 or 2, 3 ways. Especially if you have worked all your life with government, you don't have a business that is known, you have invented something, you haven't inherited your wealth, you haven't won the lottery. Your tax declarations, URA would have a record that shows if you run business, your tax declarations should match your wealth. If not, if you are in the private sector, your savings at NSSA, for example, should track your known income and declare that you're not corrupt. So the test is actually not as difficult as people want to make it. If all those are absent, but you're wealthy, then people are going to ask, how did you accumulate that wealth, whoever you might be.
Someone asked about whether the president and how much the president saves.
Yes, and that leadership code act, I don't know if it still serves any function at the moment, because the declarations are kept hidden away. They don't use them to hold anybody accountable. We need to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll be discussing a sad development, which is the flooding, the landslides in Bundibujo that have wiped out almost an entire village, an entire township, and the devastation that's happening elsewhere in the country and within the region, because Kenya, West Pokot is having significant difficulties. I'll be right back. A major mudslide flattened an entire township in Bundibujo district, but just before that we're reporting about a disaster in Bududa again, another major mudslide in Bududa, but the road Pakwach cut off, drivers spending, communication being cut off on the Nile in Pakwach, at the Pakwach bridge, and this devastation by nature, it's not just happening in Uganda, it's happening across the border in Kenya, it's happening in Eritrea. I think Eritrea received in one day rain it was supposed to receive in a year, which is the raging of nature, whether it's climate change or something else. I do not know. But what do we know about Bundibujo so far? Let me start with the people. You guys in the newsroom, what do we know about Bundibujo? What numbers are we talking about as of this? Because the rains were yesterday, Saturday, through the night into this morning.
By yesterday, I was watching news and they're saying 13 people had died.
13 people.
I don't know whether the numbers are increasing, but by last night, they're talking about 13 people who had died.
By this morning, Moses, what do we know? This morning and this afternoon, do we know the numbers?
We are not certain about the numbers, to be sure, because we are only relying on official information so far. We are not so much on the ground. It is still tricky to ascertain, because these numbers involve we might end up either blowing something out of proportion or even understating. What is true is that the devastation is huge within the Rwenzori, the Erigon, and now the Nile. Whatever is causing this might be something to really for the government to come out clear, tell us the actual cause and actual interventions.
The cause, we have ideas, because like I said, it's happening in West Pokot, in neighboring Kenya. It's happening in Eritrea. There's just a kind of a shift that the rains that were supposed to, that were not expected at this time, are coming at this time. December is normally supposed to be a dry. November, December is supposed to be fairly into January.
But then how come
It's a rainy season.
But
it's a rainy season through December?
It's slightly rainy. It's going to be, it's one of those months where it's rainy and sunny, like it rains and then shines. November is really a rainy season. But anyways, the thing that I think for me we should be discussing is, I was listening to the chairman of Duda, Wilson Watira, and the thing he said about complaining that the government had not given them equipment to look for the missing or the dead or whatever you want to call it. Sorry. For me, the thing that worried me is that we have reached a point where we can discuss this in resignation.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. Because, you see, the world over, everyone has said extremes are the new normal. As you're talking about East Africa receiving a lot of rain, Southern Africa hasn't received rain in more than a year. There are parts in Southern Africa, actually, that haven't even received real rain in 5 years. So
and parts of Eastern Europe,
yes, so
are burning up, because have been
Australia.
burning up. Australia has been burning up. The United States has also been having.
So this is the new normal. The thing that for me confuses me is why we are not doing anything about it. Why we are in fact working to make things worse, because the world over, people now think, for example, big hydroelectric dams on rivers are not a good idea. You'd rather do small renewable projects at a household level, especially for countries like Uganda, where we have a lot of sun, solar, and then, because that way you take away, for example, expenses for transmission and distribution and so on and so forth, because you're putting the power where people actually need it. So for me, the thing that gets me is that we are not doing anything. In Bundibujo, this is just the latest. I think last week we had a similar incident and nothing was done. Those are mountainous areas. I think it's you and me, we've talked about the fact that in many mountainous areas of Uganda, the people are no longer planting the way you're supposed to plant mountainous areas. You're supposed to plant but protect the soil so that it doesn't keep coming down. These are things that we have failed to do, and these are things that where in many cases we even get money to do them. In the case of Bududa, for example, not long ago there was a World Bank loan supposed to help the population in Bududa stabilize the land, but Ministry of Agriculture, which was in charge of the land, even the chairman of that fund will tell you nothing really happened in Bududa. People just kept going on in their normal, but the money somehow was spent. So the question is,
you and I were in Mbale for that CARE workshop on climate change and reporting disaster risk management. That was in January.
Yeah.
And we did go on a trip to two places. One was Bududa, where there had been flooding.
Yeah, it was also a mudslide, almost similar to the one in
and then we went to visit where the people are supposed to be resettled in Bolambuli. The thing that struck me in Bududa was that on the course of the river that had suffered a heavy mudslide and killed people, people were back there. Some were complaining that they had not been included on the list for relocation. But others were replanting their crops, matoke. Others were rebuilding their houses in that same area. And I was wondering who was supposed to be coordinating this. And Bududa has an effective, I think at the district chairman's, at the district headquarters, there is that disaster response committee led by a UPDF CAN or something that they track, they're supposed to follow, they can respond effectively. But the sheer helplessness sometimes that they can't do anything much. But does the government have the capacity to respond to some of these? Because now you have flashpoints in Bundibugyo, in Bududa, in Pakwach. You should be watching Kabale. You should be watching the course of River Nyamwamba in Kasese, and other mountainous areas. And then you should be waiting, expecting the flooding in Teso. Those floodplains in Teso.
You see,
can we respond effectively?
When I was talking about the developments in Rwenzori and the Elgon, I talked about the aspect of government coming out to explain what cannot be done, because what can be done has been suggested. Government relocated people to Bulambuli, most of them are back. When government relocated people to Chiriandongo, most of them ran away and went back. But you hear people talking about huge sums of money, billions, 10 billion, now we're talking about 20. And another time you'll hear people talking about another huge loan. So what is it that is not being done right? That's what is supposed to be asked, or answered by the government. I think government usually runs to the political question. It points at political actors. For instance, you've had in Bududa, the minister is saying the political, the MPs are failing it, but it's not true.
It is partly true.
No,
it's not entirely true.
Engage the people, because at what point, Charles, does government come with these interventions? Do we need to always do firefighting? Can we have an emergency?
But where is personal responsibility, ladies and gentlemen? We need to ask this question, because anybody who comes from these very prone areas, first is individuals should be making the first step towards securing themselves. Can you lump all this on government?
Charles,
yes.
Here's the problem. You cannot, so I agree that individual responsibility is important. But things like climate change are beyond, or maybe I shouldn't say climate change, because there are some who will argue this is just rain, it's not really climate change. But things like the weather, things like this are not about individual responsibility. So he's talking about people moving. You have to ask yourself, how many people were moved? 500 households, yeah? Or less. Bududa district has a lot of people, and by the way,
but he's talking about people who were moved but have gone back.
Yeah,
the first group, that mudslide of 2010, was it 2010?
Of Chiriandongo.
Yes, the ones that were taken to Chiriandongo. Yes, they wanted to go back. The ones that were being taken to Bulambuli. Yeah. You remember when the Prime Minister was there, and people were talking about going back.
The problem here is that you have a government that does not do enforcement, because you do not want your people dying from things like this. If we have moved you from this plot of land to another place, how is it that a country where we have LCs, we have so many leaders, how is it possible that that person goes back and is allowed to go back, and you're blaming politics? You have an RDC, you have a parish chief, you have a sub-county chief, you have all these levels of leadership. How is it possible that you cannot inspect? Because if Dicta's household has been moved from this piece of land, and it wasn't through corruption or whatever, because you see, and that's the problem, when they are compiling lists, is so and so an NRM supporter, how much does he bring, so and things like that, and then they move you as a favor, well knowing that you will come back and use both pieces of land, that given to you for supposedly being displaced, and the one that you will keep. So basically you have increased your holding.
And Victor, I think also how these billions are used is an issue. Because look, you're relocating
could you just develop that point? Because I think she's raising a very fundamental point. The question of enforcement. There is this tendency to hide behind democracy, that you're going to negotiate everything. Yeah, it's the same thing that we're talking about in the first segment on corruption, failure to take radical action that Kasasra was talking about. If government is in charge,
Charles, for me, I believe that democracy, in the way it was intended to work, works. But in Uganda, you don't even need the politicians. Like I said, you have a parish chief. Charles, you cannot lie to me that you have a parish chief who does not know the households in that place and does not know the ones that were moved and were not moved. If that's the case, what is he doing? You cannot say you have a sub-county chief doing exactly the same thing and able to do. You have GSOs, you have technocrats at almost the lowest level possible. So let's even assume that the LC chairman is not doing their job. How is it possible that you can't get the government technocrats to also do their job?
You don't want to annoy the people.
No, but
because the lowest common denominator is the people and their votes.
Charles,
yes.
If you are enforcing, if someone is enforcing, and you get, and you and I were in Bulambuli when this was happening, all the MPs kept standing up and saying, we are not against this thing. So it's not even true that it's necessarily political, that you will lose votes. The people of Bududa were there, the people of
the mountainous areas.
Yes, were there, and the ones of Bulambuli were there, and they all stood saying the same thing. It's not that we are against this relocation. We actually want relocation before the rains start. You also forget that humans are rational beings. You cannot tell me that someone who has seen their people die the day before will come back and just forget about it and go if they have a choice. They have to be so desperate for them to go back to that kind of dangerous situation.
Yes, so there are factors that push them out of these settlements.
Yes,
I think, Charles, I think there are 2 or 3 things here. One, the other day I was reading a report by environmental experts published on BBC. They are talking about specifically about these rains in East Africa, and the experts, they are blaming it on increased temperatures in Indian Ocean. I think they have increased by 2 degrees Celsius, and then with this heat now the vapor goes up, and then that's when you have all these heavy rains. It's also the same thing that is happening in Australia. It's connected
with the fires.
With the fires. So she talked about global warming. I think it tells you how this world is interconnected. In America or in China, if there's a factory that is causing fumes to go up, in the end we would be affected. And this, I think that's the thing. And I've seen them warning that these heavy rains will go down south, Tanzania, Malawi. You saw the other day, I think Victoria Falls. There was that photo of Victoria Falls drying up. So I think it's a big problem that should be tackled not only here but I think globally. But coming here, the issue is whether we have the capacity to detect these disasters, and when they happen, how do we manage? The other day I was reading, there's a quote by a gentleman who works with OPM, Martin Owol, and he was saying that they have the 99% capacity to detect these disasters. So But I don't believe.
The office of the Prime Minister, I can state for a fact, we saw this. They have disaster mapping per district. Per district. Even districts that you don't expect to have disasters, or the disasters as we know them, the natural disasters, the office of the Prime Minister has this information. It is written in books.
Is it accurate?
Yes, it is published. They have it. Whether they read it and respond to it is what puzzles you. You have Musa Chwera as the Minister for Disaster Preparedness, and every time there's a disaster, you see people scrambling. Now, beginning tomorrow, you'll hear a press conference at the Ghana Government Media Center, and the minister running to Wundebujo. Then I don't know how many pieces he can split himself into to run to Wundebujo, run to Kapshorwa, run to Bududa at the same time. The question is, what kind of preparedness do we have as a country? Because you're not seeing any new areas
Yeah, it's the same.
for these disasters. It is the same areas.
You could be an amateur and basically predict where these disasters
Exactly.
will be.
But I think,
What
but I
is the
think
kind of
Charles,
preparation?
But I think, Charles, when these people are told to leave, I think they should also.
Yes.
They should.
She made a fundamental point, I think, in my view. When people are told to leave, they should leave.
They should. Yeah.
But a functional government should have an enforcement mechanism that is going to say, this is the decision we have made as government for your safety. Whether you like it or don't like it, you're going to be beaten into line. And this excuse that, you know, it is people demanding for money from politicians to give them votes. You know, we can't annoy our voters because by telling them to have toilets and and pit latrines at their homes. We can't tell them to be disaster prepared. I think the government runs away by giving too many excuses, like just we're doing with the fight against corruption. It's the same thing. If you are a government that functions, you have enforcement mechanisms. All those layers of people that are supposed to say
That we pay
Charles
to do
Mwangusha
that.
and his family were relocated from Namete village to Walambuli. They were given this piece of land, they were given this house. The Prime Minister was there to launch the construction of these houses. He went back to launch the handover of these houses. Why is Charles Mwangusha and his family back in Namete?
in Namete? And if
What are you doing here?
Charles Mwangusha has a good reason why they are there, resolve that reason so that these people can be safe. Also, the rains, the kinds of rains we are seeing should not be the kinds that kill people. That's the other thing. That imagine if we had cyclones, if we had tsunamis, if we had the things that people elsewhere have. Would we all die as a country? Like what's the plan really? Because these rains are not as serious as you want. It's just that we are not investing in the places we need to invest in, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. But also, we cannot be taking money because we go. At least ministers, government officials go for these disaster risk management meetings. They talk big, they do what, they come back and sit back and do nothing about it. In Kampala here, and we can talk about the fact that no one has died. You have infrastructure, you do the northern bypass and fill a swamp. And you know for sure that when it rains properly, houses will flood, people will lose property. What's the point of having people talk about this disaster risk management and have those documents that you talked about if people cannot come and practice what they've learned, what they've seen is being done elsewhere? We cannot, it's not acceptable that we live the way we do. And it's not just because you have to consider that people, apart from the people who die, people who lose property then become prone to dying the next time there is that problem because
you're sending them at the lowest level of
we've learned
deprivation.
that climate-related disasters affect the poorest people the most. So people are sent back into poverty, and then you can expect that the next time, most likely, they are the ones that will die. We cannot live like that. We cannot have a government paying taxes to them, and they're not doing anything about it. And all they can say is, we have a little money here, you go and get some posho for 6 months, and that's the end of it.
Moses, she raises something fundamental. You're talking about these disasters like they happen elsewhere. So in Kampala, you don't think they happen. So if you're allowing all these factories to come up in swamps without rechanneling the water, you think it's okay, we are in Kampala. I don't know how many years it was when houses in the upscale, because we are used to flooding in Waise, We used flooding in that channel, that valley between Kasubi and Makerere, down there. You used flooding in
You're talking about Chikon.
Chikoni,
Katwe.
Katwe, that other area in on Entebbe Road.
That's Chibuye.
Zana, the Zana area, there, because majority of the people who live in those areas are poor. When we had the flooding in Tinda Stretcher and red roof-tiled houses flooded, then people started saying, wait a minute, it can also happen here. But you don't see serious action that goes into enforcement that says, even in Kampala, even if it hasn't gone to the scale that we are reporting it elsewhere, it can be as bad. You have seen people disappearing in manholes because of flooding in this town. And then the next day it dries up and God takes care of all of us and we move on.
Charles, we were talking about a functional government. And I was wondering, what are the components of a functioning government? And I was wondering whether my government, our government, is one that can fit to be called functioning. All the things you're talking about are supposed to have or belong to a planning function. Whenever it drizzles around Kampala, you'll see that areas of Clock Tower, Banda, now that area near Muyenga,
Yeah,
they
the
all,
commission.
yes, they all flood. Why? Do we have a functioning government? We shall ask. The answer to that, the people are supposed to answer, also tend to look at us. That means we stand in a vacuum. But by and large, I think that we either use these disasters to benefit us financially, the individuals who are in charge, who are supposed to be in charge. Because why then do we have to always wait for a disaster to occur that we shall think of relocating people, that we shall think of buying food, relief food, as you listen to the minister say? Why do we have to wait for these disasters all the time? When you talk about people quitting or running away from areas where they have been relocated, have we put up schools and other social amenities that support them? Do we have the trust that this land we have actually been taught to live is going to be put to good use? Because you have incidents where government keeps giving away land. You have big government officials grabbing land. What has been ring-fenced as public land ends up being somebody's land, somebody's plot of land. So perhaps these are reasons that force people back. There is no trust between the people and the government that serves them.
We need to take a commercial break because I was thinking that you move people from the Elgon slopes. You gazette that as a national park, as a national reserve. You move people from the mountain slopes of the Rwenzoris. You expand the boundaries of Rwenzori National Park and make sure that people are not going back there.
That trust is not
Let's
there.
take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be continuing the discussion on some of the major stories that made headlines during the weekend. We might be crossing over into the Democratic Republic of Congo to look at the unending wars in that part of the world. We'll be right back. You're still watching the Fourth Estate, coming to you live from Serena International Conference Center, and we are discussing some of the stories that made major headlines during the week. We started with the anti-corruption walk, and then the disasters. Our hearts go out to the people of Bundibujo, the people of Bududa, the people of Kapchorwa. We didn't talk much about the Kapchorwa cutoff, which is the first in many years in this country. But moving on, the conflicts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. President Yoweri Museveni and his Congolese counterpart have been meeting to discuss. He's reached out more than his predecessor, though the predecessor was here to discuss those same things for many years, the negotiations with M23, which were done in Munyonyo many years ago. But now, this new, the new flashpoints that have emerged in Beni, in
Butembo.
Butembo, yes. What exactly is going on? Why are these not being resolved? What was the import of the discussion between Museveni and Tshisekedi?
Well, Tshisekedi, I think, is trying to make peace with his neighbors. For the first time, we saw the Congolese president coming here with a very big delegation to meet the president, and
that was a business delegation.
Business delegation. But the intention of the meeting and what they wanted to achieve was they want to open up Eastern Congo, because it's a market Uganda is looking at with what's happening between Uganda and Uganda, so it's looking at Eastern Congo as an alternative market. So they were looking at constructing, that's what they're looking at constructing 3 roads connecting Bunagana, Ruchuru and Goma. Then you have roads connecting Butembo and Beni. Yeah, you may look at it as a business, plan, but it also has a security element. But what's happening in Congo now? We've seen increased attacks by the ADF against civilians, and these civilians are unhappy or are tired of these increased attacks. So that's why you see people demonstrating against the UN,
demonstrations
against the UN and the Congolese forces for failing to protect them. And I think the Congolese civilians are right, and you understand their frustration, because you have this biggest UN mission of about over 20,000 peacekeepers in Eastern Congo. The budget they have, they're talking about $2 billion they spend every year. But with this big force and the money that is invested there, these rebels continue killing people. So with these increased attacks by the ADF, we see civilians getting tired, saying, if you can't protect us, get out
of here.
Get out of here.
Why has the UN been reluctant to move out of the Democratic Republic of Congo? Because these demands have come from every level you can imagine. The previous government of Kabila, Joseph Kabila, had made the same demands, saying you have the most expensive, the biggest, the longest staying peacekeeping mission of the United Nations in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But the resolution that created that peacekeeping mission doesn't allow them to engage in combat, so people continue to die. The other day, when there was that demonstration, it started as a demonstration against the ADF, then you had the Mai Mai coming out and shooting, and there's an exchange. This can the idea, Dictor, of promoting business and security work alongside each other, because ADF is a Ugandan force, it is a Ugandan rebel group that has been in the Democratic Republic of Congo for so many years. The fact that its leader, Jamil Mukulu, remains in a prison cell here hasn't stopped the attacks.
So let's talk about this signing, because Tshisekedi has been all over the place signing this, signing, and the other doing that. And it's a thing that African presidents do, because, so you're talking about protests that people are tired. And maybe part of the spark is that they know they have an illegitimate president whom in the first place they didn't vote for, because they knew he would be a continuation of Kabila, that he would never resolve the problems they face. Then to cover up that loophole, that the fact that people know he's not going to resolve the problems they have, he goes around signing with, getting Rwanda and Uganda to sign an agreement that never amounted to much, going to Rwanda signing this and that, coming to Uganda signing this and the other. And all that is a cover-up. It's something that African leaders, I think, have mastered. In Tanzania, Magufuli went on a run that was supposed to be fighting corruption, and that slogan, popular slogan of what would Magufuli do. In Congo, because the leaders in Congo know that Congo's biggest problem is insecurity. He went around the leader meeting the supposed the people who have been involved in the wars in DRC, to sort of show that he's doing something about it. And because as media, we've mastered the art of, we shall create intentions for leaders. If we see a leader going to Angola, where Angola has been involved in, was in DRC, going to Uganda, whatever, then we claim he's trying to solve the problem. But what actually he is doing is the PR, the kind that we were talking about corruption, the face,
the optics.
Yeah, he's dealing with the optics, and that's the problem. Now, as for whether the business discussions will work out, the people of Tanzania, sorry, the people of DRC and the people of Uganda have been trading for a long time. It's not even true that DRC would be replacing Rwanda, because DRC has always been a bigger market for Uganda than Rwanda. It's just that because we are not in the EAC, it's not as easy to track. But actually, they are very, even before, even when it was Kabila, DRC was the bigger
Uganda
market.
shares the biggest, the longest section of its border with the Democratic Republic of Congo, and those relations have existed. I know that, for example, when the Fort Portal Bundibugyo Lamia Road was being constructed, the then minister negotiated with the governor to extend a kilometer of tarmac into the Democratic Republic of Congo to get consent to build a bridge across. Otherwise, it would have been a dead road that stops on at the Ugandan border. There is significant, there is currency in the fact that most of the Democratic Republic of Congo, as Kasasara talked about it, is not networked, especially with transport infrastructure.
Exactly.
And that causes both security problems and also impedes business. One of the worst roads you can talk about is that road that connects to Goma through Kisoro. Yes. It's a bad road, especially on the Democratic Republic of Congo side. But talking about the optics that you say, of the last 4 leaders of the Democratic Republic of Congo, President Mobutu Sese Seko, President Laurent Kabila, who took over from him, President Joseph Kabila, who left to give way to Tshisekedi the other day. Tshisekedi has tried much more to reach out than other leaders. I don't know what, Moses, you think. President Joseph Kabila, for example, had given up on the eastern part of the country.
Exactly.
He was content. You have a very large country, the size of Eastern Europe, the size of Europe, almost, that he was in charge of. So he was content to be in Kinshasa and the other parts that were peaceful. Eastern DRC was never part of his concern. At one time, you had 15 nations on this continent, all involved in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he has tried to reach out to them. Angola, I think Zambia, Zimbabwe were one leg. Then you have Uganda, Rwanda on the other side, and we're exchanging inside there. And he has tried to reach out to all these. He's gone to Nairobi, he's come here, he's gone to Kigali, he's gone to Tanzania. I think he's gone to Tanzania. He's been to Luanda to try and find a solution and govern the Democratic Republic of Congo as a country, not as part, not just part of the parts of this country. Does that help? Let Moses come in briefly, because
I think it does. That is, if the negotiations are being held genuinely. You know, a peaceful Eastern Congo is good for both Uganda and Congo, more so to Congo. When you look at DRC and the new huge infrastructure ventures the East African Community is trying to undertake, for instance, when you look at the standard gauge railway, is it a railway gauge or gauge railway?
Standard gauge railway.
Because it has not come to life, it becomes hard for some of Ugandans to pronounce the project. But with this road going through Tanzania, Rwanda to Congo, then Kenya, Uganda to Congo, it becomes apparent and very good for the leader in Congo to reach out to neighbors. But what stands in the way is the insecurity aspect. You hear different rebel outfits operating in Congo, mostly in the eastern part. If it's not M23, it is ADF. If it's not ADF, it's not Interahamwe. and all those have got an economic bearing within the region, especially the immediate neighbors, to Rwanda, to Congo itself, and to Uganda. My worry is that we have had a continued existence of ADF for so many years, and to me it appears as either a political tool or something used by both parties, both Congo and Uganda or authorities in Kampala, for their own selfish political reasons. So until this is solved, when you see the previous three leaders in Congo failing to do what Tshisekedi is doing right now, at times I tend to think, okay, maybe this young blood is genuinely reaching out to neighbors or partners for real lifetime benefits for both the neighborhood and his own country.
Dixter doesn't seem to. Dixter is very skeptical.
I think it's just an issue of the times. The times now is that most African presidents do that. Kagame visits certain places in Europe for the PR. The president of Zimbabwe does the same. The moment he became president, he almost visited almost every African country and then went to Europe and did all these things. So Magufuli didn't visit because of his personal issues with travel, but he still did something. It's the PR. It has not. It's the times. The leaders right now are like that. For me, a measure.
When you measure a leader who has some level of actual commitment.
Yes, for me, a measure of actual commitment would be, you have to remember that when DRC voted, a certain group of people towards the east were stopped from voting. Those people were never allowed to vote. You have to remember, you have to ask yourself, how often has this president actually gone to the people to address?
How do you build legitimacy? So you appreciate that your coming into power was problematic. But there is something the Kelsenian theory calls a complete revolution. That once you're in power, you've been sworn in as leader. You saw what happened in the case of you saw what happened in the case of Tshisekedi. He gets to win controversially as he did. The African Union initially withholds its endorsement of him as the new leader of the Democratic Republic of Congo because they're going through a court process. The court process is concluded and he's confirmed by his country. Then the African Union moves backwards to accept him. Once he's been accepted, what steps did you take? He carried a delegation of 117 people, members of the business community, to the Kampala meeting. The first ever meeting of its nature and of its size.
That's the problem.
Yes.
You do not go to Kampala State House where you are in an air-conditioned room to solve the problems of DRC. You go to the people of DRC. You do not go to make deals with Joseph Kabila to become, so that he can keep some hold over power. You go to the people of DRC. You go to the person who was supposed to be president and build a coalition. You do, no, it's not, and that's the problem. Like I said, these things of going to meetings with AC so that you can talk to people, so that there is a lot of international media paying attention to you. All that is meant to be a cover-up. Otherwise, he should be in those places that are rioting, trying to find a solution.
Rizdel, the demonstrations are not against Tshisekedi; they're against the United Nations. You haven't seen a demonstration, even in Kinshasa.
No, they are both.
They are both, yeah.
Okay.
So I think Tshisekedi has goodwill because I think for the first time,
goodwill or good intentions?
Good intentions, yeah. Good intentions. Sorry, good intentions. I think for the first time, we're seeing a Congolese president proposing that the neighboring countries can have a joint operation against the rebels in Eastern Congo. And actually, what's happening?
Didn't Kabila sign up some of those things in Ngorodoto, in Tanzania?
No, but
because that joint force that was supposed to monitor hostile forces that were operating in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
You know, they would sign those agreements, but days after, it's a different story. But now you're seeing Tshisekedi pushing for joint military operations against all these rebels. And actually, what's happening now, the rebels are trying to retaliate, you know, to turn civilians against the Congolese government, because the FADC, the Congolese forces, are attacking ADF positions. So I think this, like you're saying, it's good intention. I think he really wants to pacify Eastern Congo, but the issue is whether he has the capacity, because for state presence in Eastern Congo, even the Northeast, I mean, they don't have the capacity. So for yes, I mean, like any other politician, he can pull those PR stunts, but I think on this for Tshisekedi, I think he has good intentions, but.
I think I want to agree with you. I think compared to his predecessors, you see what appears to be an effort that it might be half-hearted, but some of those half-hearted efforts sometimes actually deliver results, because once you have set it in motion, it becomes difficult to pull back for your own political ends. You allow, and the country can begin a healing process. This is a country that has never healed since pre-colonial times. But gentlemen and lady, we need to move on. We have only a few minutes to end the show, and I wanted us to briefly comment about this drama in Parliament. Cabinet approved the creation of 15 new cities. They're coming in a phased manner. Now they go to Parliament and there's a debate, and members of Parliament are either dodging sessions, or when they go on the floor, they are trying to say, why didn't you add my town among the new cities? Moses, you're the one who sits at Parliament. What is all this drama about? Of course, I'm a bit biased. I know many people will be, because Fort Portal is one of the cities coming on next year.
True.
Yes.
Yeah, good enough you've started with a disclaimer. But we started this show with a discussion on corruption.
Yeah.
And these MPs are used. You see, when you're used to giving your child money whenever he performs well, one day or a time that you don't give them money, they will be
so they're trying to hold the government at ransom.
I suspect that now is the time for MPs to get some good money for the next campaign. And the president, who is the usual giver.
You mean members of Parliament want to be bribed to pass these new administrative structures called cities?
If amending only one article of the Constitution gave them 29 million, because after 27 there was much more money that used to come in bits. What about this crucial issue on cities, where somebody is trying to widen the scope of his long hold on to power? Look, when this
one of the discussions that was happening around these cities is, and the minister gave a disclaimer, the minister for local government, he said for him he doesn't create constituencies.
Yes.
That is the mandate of the Electoral Commission.
But
I find many people who are excited, especially political actors, who are excited that this gives them, especially incumbents, gives them a new lease of life.
Which is very true.
Their opponents can locate into the extra constituency that's been created out of these. All these cities, Fort Portal, Mbarara, Mbale, Gulu, Arua,
you have
Jinja that are supposed to come on, and Masaka that are supposed to come on, create in the minds of the people who are drawing the boundaries at least an extra new constituency.
A minimum of 20.
Yes. No. I mean each one of them, because each one of them has two divisions.
2 divisions, yes.
Those 2 divisions, in the thinking, is like Kampala, each division gets a new member of parliament, and then you have an extra seat for a woman member of parliament.
If a division is not subdivided again into another constituency.
Yes.
Because you might have a situation where, for instance, they're talking about Arua Central and Arua Aivu. You might find that Arua Central has another constituency
that could be created.
So
it is in the self-interest of these members of parliament to pass this motion on the creation of these cities, isn't it?
But it's just not a given that, okay, you've brought it, let's give it to you.
So they still want to extract a pound of flesh.
Some capital.
That's an interesting perspective. I hadn't come to
capital. But again, on the real gist of the matter, members are raising concerns that need to be looked at. 1 or 2 of the first concerns is these constituencies that are being created have no clear demarcations. When you create Arua Central, for instance, what are its boundaries across the board? Like, how different is it from Arua municipality? How is it different from Aivu? How far does it go? How does it neighbor Aivu? when you talk about
Wasn't this a function of the district council resolutions? Didn't they create those boundaries by the
do
district
not
council?
exist.
Okay.
When you have, for instance, Wachiso, one of the most contentious ones, is that you're creating, the resolution of the district is to the effect that they create Wachiso as a city. That's the entire district being created or elevated to a city status. But now you have a situation where you're carving out Entebbe to be Entebbe city, and then Wachiso city. So where does Entebbe city sit?
Victor, this whole drama about, I saw Kasese, spirited fights, Nzou and Winnie Kiza saying, how did you forget Kasese to be made a city? Masaka fought and got itself on with high endorsement. Mbale was part of the original ones, I think.
They
yes.
fought. It was a fight.
Yes, but it wasn't as intense as the one. And Mbale, I think Mbale and Gulu are the ones that have tended to make a reasonable progress in preparation for the city status. Yes. I'm being given 1 minute to get out of here, so.
I hear reasonable progress. The World Bank gave them money and they used it better than the others. Basically,
Yes.
that's it. But really, the issue for me is, why are we creating cities when we don't have money to rescue people who are dying from rain? For me, that would be my only question. Like, do we feel, because we've since this slogan of we are bringing services closer to the people, we've since learned that's not true. We have Kampala here, and it has not been planned. So they claim that that if you give city status, then the city is better planned. Is not the urban area is better planned. Is not true. What is it we are chasing other than gerrymandering so that the NRM can have more MPs in Parliament? That's all I'll say.
Yes.
Yeah, Charles, I think also my concern is about the cost implications of creation of these cities. Because I saw Minister Matia Kasaja saying they're asking about the certificate of financial implication, and he said practically he was saying they don't have the money. So you're creating these administrative units, and already the other day Electoral Commission was saying they don't have enough money. So the issue is about these more costs that really
Okay. Our time is out. We need to get out of here. That debate will continue because the debate is still going on in Parliament. The perspective you introduced is a very interesting one. But some people have argued and said, since Uganda gained independence in 60 years, we still have one city, which is Kampala. Others have moved on and have created these secondary cities. That it is necessary to create the secondary cities. Of course, it balloons political positions, members of Parliament, councillors, and other things. Thank you very much, Rizdale Kasasira from the Daily Monitor. Thank you very much, Moses Cheune from the Daily Monitor. And thank you very much, Dick Tasimo from the East African. Thank you very much to you all our viewers for joining us tonight. And always, do join us again next Sunday for yet another exciting discussion right here on the Fourth Estate. Have a good night.